That's pre-COVID, during COVID. So the question then becomes in post-COVID, what happens next? Um, and a big aspect of that is like, is this over forever? We'll never have more COVIDs, or we'll never have another airborne contaminant, or is it not? And secondarily, people are now very aware of air quality and health. Of course, all of you in the room are very aware. That's what you do. You're professionals in this space. But so is the general public. The general public is not going to forget that these things were happening. And the general public is also now more aware of other perils, notably wildfire, smoke, smog, and other dangerous elements like that. So going forward, we think we're going to see people being much more selective about the kinds of places they go to, because some other things have changed too. And you're thinking about, like, who wants to go to one of these roadside hotels that doesn't have any actual fresh air? It just conditions the air that you're in. Or who wants to send their child to a school that clearly has high CO2 levels because they're a proxy for COVID? Or who wants to go on a cruise ship or a restaurant? And they're competing. You see these airlines in particular and hotels competing to tell you how clean they are. But some things have changed. Um, I think there are three things that have changed that aren't going to go back. One is the general public is aware of air quality, maybe not from the point of view of cognition, but certainly from the point of view of transmitting illness. They're not going to forget. The second is that handheld devices which measure air quality are now easily available. And I believe you have a panel coming up around devices and sensors. And you can go on Amazon or Best Buy, or there's probably 100 different individual air quality monitors that you can buy for a couple €100 that can tell you in real time what the composition of the air is. This is really different. So a decade ago, if you wanted to know about indoor air quality, you had to get an industrial hygienist to come to the building. The landlord brought them. They were in like a white suit, and they had beakers and canisters, and then they went away and they sampled one bit of air over one piece of time, one day, and came back and reported it to the building manager, to the man. This is completely flipped. So people now can measure the air in their own office in real time. They can send their child to school with an air quality monitor. The negotiating power is quite a bit different. If you are thinking that you're a big hedge fund trying to recruit best and the brightest people, and they come in and they say, I don't want to work here for, I like the culture, I like the desk, but the air is really bad, I'm going to go somewhere else. Or if you think about people getting ready to buy a condo or rent an apartment, now they have that capability to see the air. The third thing, in addition to how people won't forget and how they're handheld devices, is that they are connected. So these items are in the cloud. People can talk to each other. It's really early days around indoor air quality, but imagine the power of tenants or of office workers or of ship travelers or of hotel residents if they have their own independent Kayak or Travelocity or Expedia or Glassdoor that says, here's what the air was like in these places. This happens now in some contexts in outdoor air quality. So some of you are familiar with a company in California in the US called Purple Air, and they sell outdoor air quality monitors, which are web enabled. And this network of outdoor air quality monitors turns out to be more accurate than the satellites and more accurate than the smaller network of government owned and published air quality monitors. So when people are thinking about where is the downstream cloud of wildfire smoke going, the Purple Air network, a citizen network, is more useful to them than the official air quality stats. So these three things are different, and they're never going to come back. So how does this then impact how people think about buildings? So I'm thinking back on the finance side and back to 425 Park Avenue. One is that if you have a building where it looks like you're going to either get the rental premium in a good market or the vacancy in a down market, that will attract financing, in our view, at either a beneficial loan to value or a beneficial debt service coverage ratio. It also means that for the developer, on the exit, they're likely to maybe not get a higher multiple, but they'll have a higher NOI because the they're getting more rent in that regard. So Nils has done a tremendous amount of work on this in green buildings and energy efficiency. And I imagine that Nils also has some empirical evidence around trading of healthy buildings that I haven't seen yet, but he'll probably tell you about. It also means that insurance companies get concerned. So there's a very large backlog in a litigious place like the United States of, okay, who is responsible for these COVID interruptions, for all this business interruption, for these ill people? And there are many property casualty insurers who think, why do I want to be on the hook for some landlord and some tenant who have knowingly not done the most they could for people to keep them healthy? So all else equal, as a lender, as an insurer, you'd much rather invest in these buildings that look like they are healthy and that there's been proper due diligence applied to doing that. So in many ways, people ask me a lot, do you think that various regulatory bodies are going to require more indoor air or different standards beyond the basic? And my answer is no. I don't think the regulatory agencies are ever going to get around to this. Maybe in Denmark, but it may be in Holland, but probably not in the United States. But the capital sources will, I think. And many of you are in the room now to be thinking about that going forward. So the next frontier for Joe and me around this is to go beyond individual buildings to larger groups of buildings. So our initial book about indoor air quality was building by building. You can think about this as campus by campus, or even in terms of regions that have different levels of air quality. And part of what I've been working on with wildfire people in California is the broad concept of, wouldn't it make sense to spend more money to reduce the threat of wildfires in California because of the benefit you get for public health downwind in Nevada and Utah, Colorado, and Nebraska? In the grand hand waving sense, of course, that makes sense from a system point of view, but nobody's in charge of the whole system. You have to think about who pays, who benefits. So a lot of our work now is in conjunction with healthcare companies and to think, wouldn't it make sense for a health insurer to spend some of the capital costs up front? We're seeing this in particular in multifamily housing. So some of you who think about energy efficiency, and I imagine there are some in the room here who are architects, are seeing that, at least in climates that need a lot of heating and cooling, that passive house passive house frame envelopes coupled with electrification starting to pencil in just from energy efficiency point of view for multifamily. Now, the benefit you get from passive house designs and electrification is that there's also energy recovery ventilation. That means filtration. That means much healthier air. So a co-benefit is people in multifamily housing, particularly lower income multifamily housing, who might have comorbidities like asthma, like propensity to strokes, like cardiopulmonary problems, wind up being much healthier. And there's empirical evidence around the improvement in health around some of these aspects of very serious illnesses like asthma or propensity to stroke when the air quality is better. So it makes sense in the abstract, in the deep abstract, to say, why wouldn't the health benefits make sense in the capital cost benefits up front? That's sort of the frontier for us. So I've covered a lot of things ranging from pre-COVID to during COVID to post-COVID and what we think the financial markets are going to do. And as you can tell, I'm a professor now. I'm no longer in construction and real estate, so I could talk for 28 hours about all these topics. But why don't we turn back to the audience and take some questions? I always find that the question and answer part is more interesting than the talking head part. Anyway.
Well, John, I certainly think that your talking part was super interesting. So thank you for that. I do have one of those sensors here, and I can tell you we're at 545 ppm CO2. We're in a big room with a lot of air, and I think I feel some airflow. So we are all super sharp in here, and we will continue to be that until the very end. Okay, so I got this microphone, which I'm going to throw to the first person that raises his or her hand. And like I said, John, we've incentivized people here a little bit, so I'll see many hands coming up soon. I see one, yeah.
Hey, John, nice to see you, and thank you for the talk. I always learn a lot from you. I was wondering whether you could give us some insights in terms of what are the barriers or how far are we from a situation where we can scale up? So you mentioned the work of Niels and Pete about green buildings. That is a technology that's way more widespread than the healthy buildings. Can you give us some notions about what will it take for the healthy buildings to be scaling up in the US at least or worldwide?
Sure, and I think many people in the audience probably have a thought about that as well. So in terms of scaling up, there's sort of the two classic questions. One is how do people learn about it, and the second is how do people care? So in terms of how do people learn about it, and that's what I do. I'm a teacher. I write teaching material. I do talks and things like that. And Joe is on that circuit even more. He was with President Biden at the White House on Tuesday, unveiling a healthy buildings strategy that the administration has. The administration has some other things on its mind right now in addition to healthy buildings, so I'm glad they're thinking about that. The second is how many people care, and that I think is going to be actually driven by individuals more than by companies. So Nils showed you the handheld meter, and my sense is that individuals will become aware of these things much more quickly, particularly if they have health issues or if they have children with health issues, and that will drive it. May possibly be driven by competition sort of at the top end, and you saw this race during COVID and recently post-COVID among different office building owners to say, yes, my building is demonstrably healthier. Joe and I wrote a piece for Harvard Business Review about who guarantees that your building is safe for return. And the short answer is nobody guarantees your building is safe for return. So it wouldn't surprise me to see big landlords having a digital readout right in the lobby, like the thing that Nils just showed you, saying, here's the air quality in all these rooms, here's how many days have been missed to accidents and so forth, and try and attract tenants that way. But as with everything else in real estate, it won't really happen until the market wants it. Right now, we're in this next big dislocation as interest rates are so high, and maybe there's a global recession on the table. So, I mean, if you're an investor and all of a sudden the base rate has gone up by 300 basis points, you're not necessarily thinking about healthy buildings first. I know for those of us in the room, this is the key thing. But if you're trying to place more capital from an allocation from an insurance fund, you're not thinking about the health of the building right now. You're thinking about the return. And then the other way I think it will propagate is if insurance companies start to say, I tell you what, we will give you a beneficial property casualty rate if your building is demonstrably healthy. If some, as they've done for buildings which are demonstrably green, and later on we can talk about, is there a conflict between healthy and green? So I think it will be driven, I guess the short answer to the short answer to the question is driven by tenant awareness of a lot of these issues and ability to measure them, and by lender and insurance company demands, not by any other kind of regulation, not by brokers. Developers won't do it on their own, I don't think, unless they see that demand from tenants.
Great. Okay. I have to throw really far